The Isaiah Factor Uncensored starts right now.
And welcome to The Factor Uncensored. Tonight, a special edition of The Factor that focuses on the children here in the state of Texas, specifically education. Now, when it comes down to national rankings, Texas is listed as number 35 by U.S. News and World Report. Some education leaders here in Texas say that's simply not good enough. We begin at Spring ISD, where the district says more taxpayers' dollars could soon go to private schools than what the state spends on students in public schools. It will be discussed in the special session of the legislature.
Our school districts have not been appropriately funded in a very long time. The last time we've got any increases in our funding was back in 2019, almost 4 years ago. Inflation has happened, so many things have happened, and yet we're still expected to do the same work or better with less money.
Dr. Lupita Hinojosa became the superintendent in Spring ISD back in 2022. She's an education leader who came from the trenches. She was and remains a teacher at heart. And that's why she's so concerned about the amount the state of Texas spends on educating its students, especially the 34,000 students enrolled at Spring ISD.
When we look at the amounts that the state allocates towards public school student and potentially charter school voucher students, what's the difference there in amounts?
Oh my goodness, Isaiah, that's right now there is and has been this whole legislative session proposal for vouchers. Public schools in Texas, we receive $6,160 per student. That is our per pupil allocation. Now that's if they come to school every single day. If they don't, that money is reduced, right? That's the same amount of money we received in 2019. Again, not even taking into account the inflation that we've had, the fuel costs to run those buses that we just saw, right? And there is a proposal that the governor has set forth to say it is about choice, it's about family choice, and his proposal is to give families $8,000 as a voucher, as a savings account, money that would go straight into the parents' pocket to take to private schools to pay that tuition. So imagine $8,000 going for private tuition while public schools still receive the same amount, $6,160.
If I just landed in Texas, it would seem to be an effort to destroy public schools.
Well, I'll tell you, that funding will be walking away, going to, private schools. And I'll tell you, what our parents, I think, do not clearly understand is we all believe in choice, in school choice. Here in Spring, we're an open enrollment district. You are welcome to come whether you live in Spring or not. We have our own schools of choice with amazing programs. So there is choice within public education. The carrot that is being dangled right now in front of parents saying, you'll have $8,000. You will receive the $8,000 and you can go to a private school. Now, Isaiah, you and I know that tuition at a private school is anywhere from $12 to $15, even more than that, $1,000. So, here I go to this private school, take $8,000. First, they're going to test my child to see if he can even get in there. Let's say my child makes it in there, they take the $8,000, and by January, they're like, you're up on your note. You need to continue to pay. Parents don't have that kind of money. They're going to come back to our public schools, and we will welcome them. But that money has already stayed over there. We will not receive any funding for those students, those families that choose to come back to public schools. We will take them, we will service them, we will educate them, we will do our very best. But that money is already at that private entity.
Finding yourself in a deeper financial hole.
In a deeper financial hole.
Wow. So how are Republicans in the Texas legislature responding to Dr. Hinojosa's concerns about the funding of public schools? We caught up with State Representative Briscoe Cain of Houston. Briscoe, when we talk about funding, specifically Spring ISD is saying, and they speak for many of the districts around the state, they're saying that $6,100 per pupil is not enough to survive. That's the only amount they have received since 2019. No raises, no accounting for inflation, and now the state wants to move to a voucher system. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think we can do both. So here's what I think is going to happen in the special session. We're going to pass education savings accounts for all students in Texas, and then come back and do the school finance matter. So I believe we're going to account for inflation. We're going to up that daily allotment. I don't know how high, but I believe my understanding is Texas plans to make a record investment in education.
And when we talk about, do we think it'll be at least 1,000? Because what Spring ISD and their superintendent, Dr. Hinojosa, is saying, we need at least $1,000 more per student. Would that be reasonable or within parameters of what you guys are considering?
Yeah, from conversations I had, and I was in Austin a few days ago discussing this matter, I don't see why 1,000 is not the minimum that they get from what I'm looking at right now.
And for those who say, why start the voucher program? Because when you look at the average cost of a credible private school, $8,100 a year won't do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's one reason to up the daily allotment. And I believe right now, and the bill's not drafted yet, but I'm understanding it's going to apply for all. Now, we've only set aside $500 million for it. And so it'll be kind of a first come, first serve. I understand there's kind of be some priority. So certain children with learning disabilities and things like that will be kind of our first priority. And when the money's gone, the money will be gone. But, all Texans, I believe, is the idea that everybody will be eligible for it. And we have to come back in another session to add more funding to that. But right now, you're only looking at about 0.5% of Texas students. That $500 million would be for a biennium. So $250 million. It's not from school funding. It's a different funding mechanism. So I don't see how it affects traditional public school funding.
If you take away students, or that, let's call it dollars, that's $6,100 from the public school system and convert it into $8,100 or what have you, then that public school system won't have those dollars, right?
No, the schools are going to be taken care of. And that's something that's being accounted for, and they'll be taken care of. If a child leaves, they will still receive something.
So they would be paid for kids who are not there?
That's my understanding on how it's being looked at right now. Of course, it wouldn't be the same as their usual daily allotment, but there would be some funding mechanism. They're going to be fully taken care of.
And Briscoe, for those who say this is an attempt by the governor and many Republicans to destroy the public school system, what would you say to that?
Could be the opposite. Look, I believe, and we've seen it in other states, Florida, Wisconsin, it's done nothing but improve the traditional school systems. What we end up finding is it doesn't, not everybody's leaving like everybody thinks it's going to happen. It's only going to happen in certain areas where parents want to have that choice. Really, the idea is to give them the option if they want it. If they're satisfied with their school system, they're going to keep it.
And welcome back to the Factor Uncensored. Tonight, our focus is on the education system and how the state of Texas funds schools. You heard the superintendent in Spring say they're given only $6,100 per pupil, but there is a proposal for the legislature to spend $8,100 per student on those who want to switch to a private school. The district says that's simply not fair. We talked to those who say it's time Texas steps up to the plate with funding when it comes to our children.
Your thoughts on Spring saying $6,100 per pupil is not enough to sustain a school district and get the students what they need. Representative Jones, let's begin with you.
So yes, I agree with that. And I'd be curious to know whether Spring is a recapture district, because if you're a recapture district like HISD is, you're getting even less because you're sending money to the state to subsidize, to welfareize rural places that don't have enough population. Mm-hmm. So it's super offensive. And the governor, in fact, we've been called into a special session started on October 9th for the express purpose of him trying to force vouchers, shove it down our throats, right? And that's what he said he wants to pay. There's a whole nother reason why we shouldn't support vouchers that I'm not going to go into. But the governor would prefer to have select private schools get $8,100 a year per pupil, rather than subsidize public education, so people can have in their districts where they live, in their neighborhood, sufficient money to educate their children.
Eli Melendrez, let's hear from you when you hear Spring ISD and the leader there, the superintendent, Dr. Hinojosa, say this is not enough to sustain our district and what our students need, the $6,000 plus per student, and the state is willing to give vouchers for $8,100, but not to public schools, to private schools. Your thoughts on that, Eli?
You know, Representative Jones is absolutely right. $6,160 is the basic allotment. Like you said, that hasn't gone up since 2019. Since 2019, we've seen, you know, the purchasing power of that 6160 be diminished significantly over the past just 4 years. And, you know, the governor loves to tout with his talking points of how he, you know, funded education to the highest point ever. You know, if you just look at the facts, if you just look at what that 6160 is purchasing, it's just not significant. And you're absolutely right. This is part of a concerted effort to privatize our education system. You know, the fact that he is offering a voucher, you know, a universal voucher that everyone can take advantage of, going to privatized schools. This is taxpayer money that is going to private education that is not accountable to taxpayers, is absolutely ridiculous and, you know, should be admonished. You know, we just got today the call for the special session, and there's nothing to do with increasing teacher funding. There's nothing to do with increasing per student funding. The only thing that is on that call related to public education is, you know, his voucher scheme. And we know it's a scam. We know it's going to further, you know, defund education, and it's not addressing the problems.
And Eli, when you take a look at many of the accredited, well-respected private schools, $8,100 is not enough for a year's tuition at these schools.
I was going to bring that up.
Go ahead, either one of you.
So here's what I was going to say. I was going to suggest that you do a whole segment on vouchers so we could tell you why it's the hoodwink and bamboozle. But private school costs more than $8,100. And let me also tell you this, that a private school that doesn't include transportation, and private schools don't have to accept you. So what it's actually going to end up being is a subsidy for rich people. And once the money is sent to private schools, it leaves the public schools, which leaves the public schools where the kids live in shambles. So once the parents, if we, for purposes of this only, let's say vouchers pass, and they will vote, I'm voting against them, I'm a hard no. Once you go to the private school and recognize you don't have enough money for lunch and all those other things, and you go back to your neighborhood school, they don't have the money to eat. They don't even have the $6,100 because they've been given $8,100 to the private school. So it's a hoodwink and bamboozle, and we need to be against that, but it's just not fair, and it is decimating public education. And I'm really thankful that there are a bunch of rural places that are against this, because they are already so spread out so far, and they don't have a lot of options to go to private school. So there's a bunch of marketing that's just entirely inaccurate, and we should not tie vouchers to teacher pay. We should not, because this is going to eviscerate public education. And not everyone can afford private school. They just can't, even with vouchers.
Welcome back to the Factor Uncensored. There is a battle brewing here in Texas. School districts are saying they need more money spent on education. Now, currently, rounded off, the state spends about $6,100 per pupil in Texas when it comes to public education. Compare that to, say, New York, where U.S. News and World Report says they spend $25,000 per student. Connecticut at $20,000 per student, and New Jersey is also right there at $20,000 per student as well. Still to come here on the Factor Uncensored, Spring ISD has joined a group of Texas schools suing the state for the way they are graded. The plaintiffs say this new accountability scale came out the blue. We talk about it next here on the Factor. And welcome back to this special edition of the Factor Uncensored, where we are focusing on education right here in Texas. Several school districts have now filed a lawsuit against the Texas education Education Agency. Why? The agency released annual report cards on districts measuring their progress. Districts can get an A through F score every year. Now, district leaders say the TEA changed its rating system for the 2022-2023 school year in the middle of the game with no notice to them.
Dr. Hinojosa, on September 12th, Spring ISD decided to join other schools in the lawsuit against TEA. Why was that necessary, and lay out what that lawsuit is about?
Sure. So in Spring ISD, our board, first and foremost, I have to tell you, our board is focused on ensuring that all students have an excellent, equitable education. And we focus on public education. And so as we've been all last year experiencing the fact that our teachers were teaching, our principals were leading, we were working very hard, but we did not know what the standards were, what we were working towards. And many of you may know that the Texas Education Agency grades schools and school districts, letter grades. We've always known what the expectation is. However, this year, the entire year went by, and to date, we still do not know what that standard is. So our board said, no, this is not right. Plus, it does not follow the state statute. The state law actually calls for the commissioner to inform all schools, school districts, prior to the start of school, what that standard will be.
And when you guys reached out, your district reached out to TEA. What were you told when it came to standards and accountability?
Well, this is what we've heard all year long. As superintendents, we've met with the commissioner. As you know, he's been across the country explaining that standards need to be improved, that standards need to be raised to ensure that children are getting the best education possible. That's not the problem. We agree. In Spring ISD, we agree. Bring on the standards. Our kids can meet them. But tell us what the standards are so we know what we're working towards. For example, when you and I were in school, went to college, first day of school, we walked into our class, our professor gave us our syllabus. That syllabus told you straight out, you got one project, it's worth 10 points. Midterm is worth 5 points. And so you knew exactly what each project was worth and what you needed to do to earn that A, that B, or C. Imagine that you've worked all semester long. At the end of the year, the professor comes in and says, nope, I'm changing the rules. And that's exactly what the commissioner is doing right now, because what the proposal that he has shared shows that those rules have changed and they're actually applying retroactively to students that have already graduated.
How damaging could that be to a school district?
Very damaging. I can explain, I can share with you that specifically urban districts like Spring ISD, where our children excel, they show growth year after year after year, that they are progressing. Under the proposed accountability system that we still don't know if it's final or not. Now remember, we don't know if it's final or not, and the children already took the test in April and May. But under that accountability system, districts, and specifically children, will not get the points for growing year after year.
Do you think that system is fair that TEA has put into place addressing accountability and grading of schools here in the district, or around the state, rather?
I can tell you that there's discussions going on about that and how we need to do it. Of course, we do need to measure what we pay for. I think the taxpayers deserve to know whether the money is being used wisely. There are a lot discussing whether it's unfair, and I can tell you the legislature is looking at it, and those people are being heard with their concerns.
And for those who are complaining, they're saying they didn't know where the goalpost was. They're coming back after the fact saying, okay, this is what you should have done. But the school districts are saying, well, you're telling us after the fact, after you're grading us, we should have known this at the beginning of the year. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can't speak to Spring ISD and whether they knew, but many of them were informed ahead of time of what they should be expecting. And Whether they're now acting like they didn't know any better, on an individual basis, I'm not sure I can confirm that. I've had enough information to know that some knew what was expected of them, and now they're kind of crying wolf.
Your thoughts on that, Representative Jones?
Well, but they've always done that. That's what they did in order to take over HISD. There was a standard. We met the standard. They then go and say, no, we're raising it, which caused HISD to score lower, and they took it. They do that all the time. How on earth can you prepare for a test or train for something and you have no idea where the goalpost is? You think this is a touchdown. It used to be a touchdown. It used to be an A. And when TEA recognizes that you're going to pass it, and they're trying to take over the urban districts, which Spring Branch is an urban district with a really high Hispanic population, then they go and they change it and they make you fail. And then they get to take over your school and interfere in what you're doing. And they bring in a whole bunch of people who aren't even from the neighborhoods, who are even from the school district, to come in and make decisions about your children that have no accountability to students, teachers, or parents.